Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are tuned to the Nighttime Podcast, focused on the fringe of Canada.
Hello listeners. Tonight we're going to catch up on a story I first shared with you in a May 2022 episode. In that episode, titled Child Sex Trafficking, Survival, and Justice, we met with Jane Doe, a Nova Scotian woman who shared the story of her multi-year odyssey of child sex trafficking and sexual abuse. The timing of our meeting with Jane was quite special, as she was not only sharing her story publicly for the first time, but she had also just begun the process of seeking justice against the man who had begun abusing and trafficking her when she was only 14 years old. Well, as you probably expected, there have been some interesting developments since that episode was released, and Jane offered to rejoin me and get us all up to date on her still unfolding search for justice. If you missed Jane's first appearance on Nighttime, I've added a link in the episode description to help you get caught up. But for everyone else, let's get back into it. Tonight in this episode of Nighttime, I'll again be joined by Jane Doe to continue our discussion surrounding child sex trafficking, survival, and justice. Thought where we start, just right off the bat, I want to ask about, I know coming forward with your story and sharing it in that detail, I believe it was the first time you did it, but what I want to hear about is, how does it feel now, like having, a couple months pass with coming out with your story? Give me your thoughts on sharing it in the way you did.
Well, I mean, it's definitely been an experience, in kind of a weight lifted off my shoulders kind of thing, where I don't feel like I'm kind of keeping this a secret anymore, but in the same time, it's been a little exhausting, feeling like I've been having to comfort everybody that I've come out to.
I got you, yeah. But I know, like, I can't relate to it because I've never had something kept in for a long period of time and eventually revealing it. But for you, it's been, for the most part, and we talked about this the last time you were on the show, is you are, even like some of your close friends and coworkers and such, like they had no idea you kind of lived this life in your past. So you were on my show and you told your story using, your disguised voice and in the alias. But aside from coming out on my show, did you come out to more people in your life as well, like since you appeared?
Yeah, and I actually use coming on the show as the way to kind of put it out there to say, okay, so, I went through this and this is, what I'm going through now, like dealing with the court case and, like the warrant coming out. And, but if you want to hear about it, like, here's a link.
That's a kind of a smart way to do it, because that I remember as well, you talked about this, your discomfort and kind of comforting people who are traumatized by your story. This is a way for you to kind of step away from that. You can be like, here's the link, listen to it and hear my story, and you don't have to cry on my shoulder as you hear my troubled story. So that's good.
Essentially, and I don't know if that makes me sound selfish or not, but the only person I haven't told so far yet is my dad, like my biological dad. So he's going to be in the city in a couple of weeks, so I got plans to tell him, kind of then, but, everyone else on his side of the family, because that's all I really talk to, like, family-wise, so it's kind of all I got, but the rest of them know, except him, and feel a little bad, he's going to be the last one, but I got to tell him to his face, I can't do it over Facebook like I kind of cowardly did with everyone else.
Wait, and when people hear your story and all that you've been through, what have kind of the reactions been? I'm sure people are surprised that you've kept this in and lived this life for so long. What have you heard from people?
Just kind of a lot of the stuff I was expecting to hear, like, well, that makes a lot of sense now, or well, yeah, that makes, well, basically just makes a lot of sense, because, I had already gone through, like, some other stuff, and, when I was dealing with addictions, it was everyone asking me, well, why am I an addict? And I didn't, tell everyone why, but now it kind of makes sense to them in that hindsight sort of
Mm.
view.
Which is kind of interesting because it talks a little bit, or maybe gives a different view on why it's important to be empathetic to people that you see struggling. Because everybody, and you've heard this before, is that everybody who's struggling, there's something that's causing them to struggle, or there's some story that they have that, they're not wearing a shirt that says like, I survived, blank, and that's why I'm like this. But when you see somebody going through something, there's much more to it than the average person thinks. And I guess there are likely people who saw you in some of your darker times thinking, what's up with Jane? They hear that episode and they're like, oh, like Jane was going through some serious stuff.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Any other kind of reactions you want to share, like, or any kind of things people said to you after hearing it that surprised you or caught you off guard?
No, just a lot of supportive messages, just so kind of like, we're here for you and we love you and, just kind of keep us in the loop. And,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, other than that, I had like one of my cousins just message me and we kind of talked about some stuff. She had some questions and just kind of wanted to know a little bit more, but wanted it to be a little bit more private. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciated that. So, and I mean, I get everyone's going to have questions, and, I want to try to be sensitive to that too, because I sort of kind of feel like, because I've kept it a secret, everybody's got a little bit of a right to know
Mm-hmm.
at
Yeah.
this point. So,
Yeah, I can get that. Do you think like people, like a family, close friends knowing your story, do you think that'll change any kind of relationships you have with these people, or change how people view you? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because certainly it's going to be, you're pulling a bit of the covers off of a significant part of your life and your story.
well, if anything, I've kind of noticed, at least with like one of my relationships, I guess, that that's sort of changing in a way that I never really expected to. So, as I had mentioned to you, prior, so I have an ex-wife. So she's somebody I had to reach out to, because of the case and stuff, because we were together at that time. And so she's willing to testify and, be there for me. And that's been really nice. So,
Mm-hmm.
having to reach out to her, it's, we hadn't talked for a few years and we left things pretty sour last time I talked to her. So, reaching out, it was, kind of nice that she just very quickly answered the phone and kind of like it was nothing and was incredibly supportive. And, so
Oh, that's
that's been
good.
really nice.
That's good. It's never good to have to reach out to an ex, and especially when it's like, reaching out to an ex and asking them if they'll get involved in a criminal case. But I guess your circumstances are quite a bit different than the way I'm picturing doing something like that.
Well, it's a little bit of like a healing thing. You get a chance to kind of sit down and, really kind of talk things through. And, I mean, that's always nice to have. And, communication's important. So if
Hell
you're
yeah.
able to mend broken, fences, it's good to do so.
Mhm.
Not for the other person, it's just for you.
Speaking of mending broken fences and also opening kind of old wounds, something else that we talked about when we last spoke is, and this one's a bit more complicated, is some of the other children who were being abused and trafficked alongside you. You had told a story about how one of them specifically tried to have your trafficker and abuser charged with it. And I believe they reached out to you and some of the others who were being trafficked, asking for you to get involved and testify against him. And at the time, for the reasons you explained in the prior episodes, you declined to do that. And I believe the charges against him were eventually dropped. You felt some remorse and guilt for not helping her, years ago back then. I understand there's been some updates with that side of the story. What has happened?
Yeah. So, we've kept a little bit in contact. It's been, kind of nice to be able to talk to her again and just see, just how great her life is now, and just how well that she's doing for herself and just how happy she is, and like she really deserves it. And, she doesn't harbor any kind of like, hard feelings or anything. So that's been just kind of nice. So I can let that guilt go. You know, so she's not going to be involved in the trial as far as I know, because it's just what she's told me. But, you know, she did say that she'd speak to the officer involved, and
Okay.
I don't know if they have or not, because I told her, you know, I'd just kind of back away at this point and just give her some space, because
Mhm.
it's been a lot, you know, like we talked pretty heavily for a few days, so.
Oh, good. And if I recall correctly, when we last spoke, it had been a long period of time since you had spoke to her. How did you reconnect?
Just basically sent her a message on Facebook. It kind of took me a little while to find her, because I really just, for the life of me, could not remember her last name.
Hmm.
It just blanked me one day, and then it just came to me, and I remembered, and I sent her a message and just said, "Hey, listen, what if I were to tell you that I was going to have him charged? And if I was, you know, like, would you maybe help me and even just give a statement or something?" And she had told me, you know, I don't, you know, just no way. You know, there's no way that that's happening. Like, there's no way they're going to have him charged again. And,
Hmm.
you know, I told her, well, they are. Like, this is real life. So,
Hmm.
you know, if you can help me, like, I'd appreciate it. And if you don't, or just aren't comfortable with that, I totally understand. And I would never hold it against you. And just, you know, thanks for not, I suppose, hating me for all these years.
Hmm. Like even just
So,
like them responding to you in a friendly way was probably a bit of a healing kind of thing. But I realize now, like talking to you present day, I realize the extent of what she went through because I gathered some of the court documents to get a sense of what the allegations against him were back then and what evidence was presented against him. And it really painted the picture of her word against his word in a courtroom. So I can imagine it was a very hard time for her as well, and a hard time for all of you. But I guess I can only assume that the other children that were trafficked and abused by him are rooting for you again as a collection of women now rather than a collection of young girls. But
yeah.
um, well, let's get an update on the case. So again, just to recap, when we spoke last time, where it was at was the early stages. You, if I remember correctly, you called like a number to report child sex trafficking, I believe, and a case had been opened, but you weren't really sure exactly how far it had gone, but it was looking like they were taking it very seriously. What's happening now? Where are you at with this? Because I understand it's things are really starting to heat up.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of recap it, I had made my statement. They had taken a statement from a friend of mine. And from there, they had kind of done up like a list of charges, you know, that they had planned to charge him with.
Mm-hmm.
Told me that it would take a couple of months to get the warrant issued, because he's in a different province right now. So there's kind of multiple agencies involved.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it was just going to take a couple of months, but they told me it would be probably around July. So here we are in July. So basically, warrant month. I don't know when it's going to come out. They're not going to tell me, right, for obvious reasons, and I'm sure whatever policy that falls under. But um, I'll kind of know after it happens or kind of as it's happening. They do have a few more people that I know that they had to speak to. Now, I haven't gotten, I suppose, too many updates on like who and when, you know, that they've spoken to people. I know that another agency had to, you know, speak to my ex-wife because she's also in a different province.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to speak to one of the victims in this province and then another victim in a different province because she's now relocated
Okay.
and she may be willing to testify. I don't know. I haven't been able to reach out to her because I do believe we have each other blocked on Facebook still after all this time. And
Yeah. All right. So anyway, so there's at this point in the investigation, different agencies are all cooperating to interview the different people in different provinces with an interest in this. You're expecting that July, that we're when we're talking now, that at some point during this month, it's likely there's going to be a warrant issued for your trafficker. With it coming up on you like this, how's it feeling? Like, do you feel like things are about to go down and you're about to see hopefully justice?
um, Well, I mean, kind of like we had spoke prior, even just with like little bits, like even just today, like at work, kind of feeling, a little bit like I have, pieces that he's taking from me, even still to this day, that, and he hasn't even been arrested yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just kind of living in those extra, I guess, little anxiety moments, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little extra anxious at everything, maybe a little extra sensitive, just because I know it's coming and then
Mm-hmm.
it's going to get really quick and really real, really fast. And had a little bit of a regret moment today of even just going through with it all, just, with, kind of what had happened at work. So it was, I've worked really hard, to get my life to where it's at. And, to kind of feel like he's interfering in that now, it just makes me angry,
Mm-hmm.
really. So I guess that's just where I'm at with that.
Um, and when you say a regret moment, do you mean like was there are there points when you're thinking to yourself like, why am I even bothering having this guy charged? Like, is that what you mean?
A little bit. But I mean, even just I was expecting that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe just, through my line of work, like I kind of know how this process is and, when I've heard it, like from clients and stuff, just how daunting and emotional, like this roller coaster is
Mm-hmm.
that, they lived with regret moments and moments where they just said like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I just kind of want to back out and I just want my life back to where it was prior to doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had my first moment of that today and like did have to collect myself and say like that's not like that's what the heart feels, but that's not what the logic mind is, saying.
I get you, yeah. Because like I guess at some like in the moment, like in an individual moment, maybe it's easier just to kind of put the demon in the closet and shut the door. But that just gets you through that moment. Overall, you need to, get it out and slay the thing, and that's a bit more of a journey. It's a shame that it's such an uphill journey for like when I think of your situation, you were a child who was abused and trafficked. Now, years later, after dealing with it all these years, you have to go through all this work in this huge uphill battle to actually have something happen. And then it's not going to be easy because likely you're going to be in court testifying. If it's a high profile thing, you're going to maybe even have your name or something in the paper or a photo or something like there's a lot that is put on the line to actually do it. So it's not as simple as just making a call to the police and reporting this person for it. Like you kind of got to go to battle for a considerable amount of time, I assume.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's going to be worth it in the end, because,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like all I have to kind of just keep reminding myself,
Mm-hmm.
because even if he was to get away with it a second time, like I took him to court, and I pointed him out to the world, and said, this is what he's done to me. Whether, I suppose a judge or a jury decides if they believe me or they side with me on that is kind of a different story. And that doesn't overly really matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's being able to look him in the eyes in court, as he sits there in handcuffs and, and I say to him, this is what you've done to me and this is how it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be what's worth it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And even in the moments where I, even today had said, to myself, I kind of regret this. I also, on my really good days, where you had mentioned with my name potentially being in the paper, it won't be, just because there is going to be an active publication ban. Like that was something that I requested when I gave my statement.
And is that something you can just request, or is that because you were a child at the time of the offense, or do you know?
No, it is something that I can request. Now, if I was still currently a minor, like that's just an automatic thing.
Mm-hmm.
But where I'm an adult now, if I wanted my name in the paper, I could just tell, it's the prosecutor, I guess, that makes that kind of call. I
Okay.
do believe, like, I don't want to like kind of quote myself there because I'm not a lawyer, but
Oh,
I
okay.
believe it's the prosecutor. But
Yeah.
I kind of flip-flop there sometimes, and I'm like, you know what? Now that more people know, I kind of want to say, like, what's the point of having a publication ban when I want the world to know?
Hmm. Yeah,
But
but
then, I have bad days where I want to crawl into a hole and, like, say,
yeah,
no, I don't want anyone to know. Like, this is too much.
yeah, I can only imagine how that would feel, and to have like your personal identity connected to something like this. it's a double-edged sword, because for one, it's like you're doing something courageous and you're standing up for yourself and others like you. But also, if you are publicly coming forward, you're also opening yourself up to, like, I'm always going to have to be talking about some of my darkest moments, and people are going to know me for, kind of the worst experiences that I've gone through. So there's a lot that would come along with being a public person or coming public with, the crimes against you, I suppose. What I want to get into next, when we did our original interview a few months back, I heard from a lot of listeners who, like myself, were shocked and appalled, but also fascinated to hear someone who had been through what you'd been through speaking so casually about it. And a lot of people had given me feedback on different things that you said, or asking for more information on different parts of your story. So there's a couple things that I want to a couple boxes I want to tick off that listeners had wanted to hear you comment on. One is, and I think we may have just briefly gotten into this in our prior episode, is they asked, like, since you were, at the time you were being abused and trafficked, it was in HRM, like the Halifax Regional Municipality, and in Nova Scotia, where you still are now. And it's not that big of a place. So we're assuming that you run into, on occasion, people who had abused and trafficked you. Is there any experiences that you can share where, I don't know, just as an example, you're at the mall and, at the table next to you, you see Buddy with his wife and you recognize him as someone who had abused you? Do you have any examples of running into someone that you knew from this?
Only one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually about 4 years ago when I started working at the job I'm at now, when I was still on a student placement.
Oh, okay.
I was with another staff member who, has since retired.
Mm-hmm.
But we were just together at the grocery store, just getting things for like a work party. I don't remember what it was. I think it might even have just been someone's birthday. But we were picking up just stuff at the grocery store, and he came up to us and, had called me by, like the name that I had used at that time, and just kept saying, oh, hey, like, do you remember me? And like, and I just kept brushing him off. I'm like, buddy, I don't know you. I just, like, very clearly telling him, like, I don't know you, like, please leave me alone. And had to try to keep my composure together. And it was actually the staff member I was with who told him and actually said, like, clearly, dude, she doesn't know you and doesn't want to talk to you. Like, step away. Just back off. So we kind of checked out and went out to her car, and as we were leaving, I couldn't even kind of keep it in anymore. I just started bawling in her car, and she asked me, like, basically what was going on, and kind of assumed, she knows, because that's not my name, like the name that he had called me by, and then I told her, and had, kind of just briefly explained it to her, and I just asked her, I said, please don't tell anybody because no one else knows, and And I told her, I was like, to be honest, when we get back to the office, I'm just going to go to lunch and just tell everyone I went to lunch, and I'll be back and I'll kind of have my stuff together.
Oh my goodness. So this person wasn't ashamed of themselves, obviously, to like approach you publicly. And just for people who don't get the name thing, when you were being trafficked, it wasn't the people who were paying your trafficker to be with you, they didn't know your real name. Your trafficker or whoever would have assigned you like a fake name that you were using. So this person in a grocery store approaches you using that fake name from when you were being trafficked. You're with a coworker. So, oh man. So I'm imagining you're like, I want to get the hell out of here, but I'm with my coworker. So I gotta,
I'm literally still feeling that kind of feeling, like just as I had said that, where I just kind of want to just run away and just crawl out of my own skin, because it hasn't happened since, and it was only just that one time. But I always think in the back of my head, like, if I'm just at the mall or just driving or just out and about, and just some random man like who I don't know or recognize just stares at me or just looks at me in a different way, I wonder, like, like, were you one of those guys? Like, do you recognize me? Because my looks have never changed. Like, I even look at, like, old baby pictures and, like, young pictures of when I was, like, 5 and 6, and I still have the exact same face. So, I mean, my looks have never changed, but I don't, recognize a lot of people, so...
Mm-hmm. That is a horror story. I can just vaguely imagine the panicked feel that you likely went through. And then also that would have put you in a position where you had no choice really but to tell your coworker something you're not at all prepared to reveal to her, because the other option would just be like well, actually you have no other option because your coworker obviously knew something was going on. So you had to say something. And
Yeah, and that coworker, she had been at our organization for over 20 years, like, so she had seen some stuff. So, I mean, like,
okay.
she already just instantly knew.
Hmm.
Like, I didn't have to say anything, she just knew, but it was like kind of word vomit,
Yeah,
and I
man.
wanted to vomit.
I bet. Yeah, that's brutal. Um, Another thing, I don't know what you can say about this or how comfortable you are talking about this, but what somebody had wrote to me and asked me about, and was curious if I had spoke to you about this. So I did an episode in years ago where I spoke to an adult sex worker who's doing it willingly and takes the necessary precautions to protect herself and all this stuff. When she was on the show, we talked a lot about how she protects herself and her health when she's having sex with people in the course of her sex work. The person who had wrote to me asked me, in your case, where you would have been a child being trafficked, so being a child, you would have been a little ignorant to it, but also since you were being trafficked and abused, it's not like you were in a position where you were calling the shots on how things were happening. Um, when something like what happened to you happened, or when this happened to you, did you have any say in what people? I just don't want to get graphic. Did you have much of a say in people requiring people to use protection? And then the other kind of flip side of that is, have you had health complications as a result of this part of your life? And is there anything about that you can talk about?
That was one thing that, like, my trafficker was pretty adamant about,
Mm-hmm.
like, was protection.
Mm-hmm.
And that pretty much, like, if the guy didn't want to wear protection, that I was to leave. Like,
Okay.
so I didn't. Like, I was fortunate in that way to not contract an STD or anything that would ultimately ruin my life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get pregnant. Um, so, and I actually, just on a different kind of like health note that was unrelated, like, I actually struggled with infertility for a really long time, so I never would have got pregnant anyways.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah.
Okay. And do you think your trafficker requiring the protection? Do you think that was to protect you, or was it to protect the investment that maybe he
Oh no,
had in
it's
you?
the investment for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Because especially it wasn't even so much about getting an STD, because he said, penicillin cures everything. But yeah, it's really gross. I know, and I roll my eyes as I say it, but
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy will take you out for 9+ months. So, and not just being pregnant, then you have your baby, and then, he says you're fat, and yeah, a lot of really degrading stuff. So,
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I guess I can see it from both sides, but at least I'm glad to hear that it wasn't. I think the person who wrote me that message likely saw it as you having like long term kind of health effects from it. But given your experiences, or given his protecting of you in that way, be it for the wrong reasons, I guess that's one fortunate side of this.
yeah. Well, and it's been a common question, like, really, mostly from like my family and stuff. And I
Hmm.
think it's just a basic kind of general question that everyone gets curious about. Like, how did I never, contract, an STD? How did I never get pregnant? How did I never, yeah, have anything horrible like that kind of happen to me health wise? And I don't
But
know. I like to just say maybe I lucked out, but
yeah, and I'm sure not all trafficked people are as fortunate.
yeah.
Um, you know, there's a few other things that I have. So I'm kind of, this is like rapid fire where
Yeah.
I'm going from topic to topic. But one thing that when I think of, and I've told you about this before, is sex trafficking and child sex trafficking comes up on my show a lot when I'm covering missing persons cases, where it often seems like that is a theory and something that needs to be ruled out. If a young girl goes missing, who were they talking to online? You know, is there someone who maybe scooped them up and is taking them away to sex traffic them? There was just a situation. I don't know if you followed this case. It was a young woman, I think 14 years old, in British Columbia. She was last seen, and this is just a week or two ago, she was last seen getting on her school bus. She gets dropped off at school, but she didn't go into class. No one knew where she went, so she was reported missing. There was a large campaign to find her and generate leads. There was billboards, rewards. Her family was on the news. It was out of character for her to disappear, so they knew something was going on. And after about a week or so, I think people were starting to fear the worst. But then there was a surprise break in the case where this 14-year-old girl was found somewhere in the United States with like a 40 or 50-year-old man who ended up being charged with child luring. Details of the case have yet to come out as far as how he connected with her and convinced her to go down there. But when you see a story like that in the news, or when you see a missing girl or I guess missing boy for that matter in the news, with your background and the things you've been through, you must see it in a different way. Like, how do you react when you see these kinds of stories play out?
It's just heartbreaking, really. And what's more heartbreaking is just kind of the comments that people leave online. Not even really, I mean, like, because the stories themselves are, like horrific and, like they're traumatizing, really to like read and, know that somebody else is now going to live with that pain, for the rest of their lives and kind of replay that. But it's really the comments because, that's what people don't seem to understand is, victims see that stuff. Like they may not comment, but they see that, you call them, a frequent runaway, or that you call them a drug addict, or you said, oh, I bet you went willingly, with that 40 or 50-year-old man, and, or, what did you expect talking to a 40, 50-year-old man? They don't help. And, and it's comments like that that make victims never want to come forward or them never want to say anything. Especially when it kind of leaks to the media and they put their own spin on it.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess it just kind of speaks to be empathetic to people who are living with something that you don't know the full story or the full picture. And you said earlier when I asked about the health thing that was one of the common questions you get. For people who've learned about your background or people who you encounter as a result of your history being sex trafficked, what do you see as some other common questions? Like, what are people coming to you with or wanting to hear more information on?
I get a lot of questions of where were my parents? And then it was, well, when I tell people that I was, partially in care, but partially living with my mom and, or living in group homes, it was, well, where were the social workers? Or why didn't you just say anything? Like, that's probably the number one question is, well, why didn't you just go to police? Why didn't you just tell a teacher? Why didn't you just tell an adult? I could tell them, but, I'm afraid, like of everything that, this guy has told me.
Yeah, and he had you, as you described last time, he had you convinced that he could do harm. He could also do harm to you physically or harm to people that you know and love. And then on top of that, in your situation, it was you were reliant on him for drugs and security, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And the idea of like someone asking, where were your parents or the social workers, for one, that seems like a very fortunate position that they can't imagine you as a child without having someone all over you supervising you. But I imagine when you're in care the way you were with a mother who is a drug addict or alcoholic, it was like the Wild West for the most part. You could get into as much trouble as you wanted to, I'm sure. When you have a social worker looking after you, they're not holding your hand walking around the mall with you all the time. I wouldn't think.
You're honestly lucky to ever really see your social worker outside of court, let alone really hear from them. Like they just kind of drop you off at the doorstep and say like, good luck and here's your stuff and call me if you need anything, but I'm most likely never going to call you back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really wouldn't have made a difference in my opinion, like just at that time, but I mean, who really knows? I mean, even when I try to look back in hindsight as an adult and think, well, I could have done this, but it probably would have led to this outcome, and yeah, that wouldn't have looked so good. So it just seems like any road I hypothetically think of, it really led to nowheres with light in
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, and then I also, and just in hearing you say that, I'm thinking of what you talked about earlier about having like kind of a moment of regret. We're thinking like, about maybe backing out of pressing charges or something like that. As an adult, you can have that moment of regret and questioning your decision, but then, your logic and reasoning takes over and you think it through and you're like, no, I'm doing the right thing. I'm going to proceed. But when you're a
Yep.
14, 15-year-old, maybe there was a moment where you're like, maybe I should, maybe I should go to the cops. But it's not like you're intelligent enough and kind of have the wisdom as a 14 or 15-year-old where you can really think it through and make the right decision. You're probably scared and intimidated. And even as an adult, going to a police station is a very uncomfortable, kind of daunting thing. As a 14 or 15-year-old, you'd be terrified to do that. I think that's like I said, it's a very fortunate position that there are a lot of people that couldn't imagine, you feeling as alone and vulnerable as you did at that time.
Yep.
Um, now, in thinking of your experiences and all that you've been through, what what would need to change in society? Like what simple thing could be changed to help prevent things like this? Like what happened to you? What would help prevent it from happening to other kids? Like is there something that you see that that could have shut this down pretty quick?
Um, Maybe a little bit too much to count. I mean, I feel like it's part of that, it takes a village to raise a child,
Hmm.
so I mean, I feel like, people in the school setting, like they can step up a little bit more, why is the student tardy all the time? Just why are they never here? And when they are here, why are they just not focused or seem strung out? Or, I just, there wasn't any kind of outreach from the school. There's no follow up from the social workers, so there's nothing from the Department of Community Services, there's
Hmm.
no support there. Um, just there's no one checking in,
Hmm. Yeah.
to say that this is weird and what's going on. There was nobody asking, this is weird, what's
Hmm.
going on?
And
There
while
really
you
needs to be more of that.
Yeah, and while you were kind of in like the throes of it, were you in school? Were you attending school at all? Like when it was kind of at its worst?
A little sporadically.
Hmm.
Like I know that one of my teachers flat out asked me, like so I would have been in grade 10, if I was uh going to the bathroom to use drugs. Because I don't know what I can really say.
Okay.
But like going into the bathroom every 15 minutes, saying I gotta go to the bathroom and coming back and looking a lot more awake than what I was, I suppose, a lack of better words,
And
and asked me flat out, and I told her no. I
but were
lied
you?
right through my teeth to her face, and she believed me. I don't know why.
Mm. Well, I wonder if like a random teacher, I wonder if they would even understand drugs and stuff enough to be able to anything beyond taking your word. So you were doing what were you doing in the bathroom
Cocaine.
in grade 10? Wow.
Yeah.
Because you would have been an addict then, right?
Yeah, and meeting up with the friend who actually gave her statement. So, 'cause she was around for literally all of it. So, we went to the same school because she lived across the street from me. So,
Wow. We used to sneak out for cigarettes every so often, and I thought I was, ruining my life.
oh no,
Um,
we smoked right in the bathroom.
um, well, but again, you're coming out the other end of it all, and it's
Yeah.
it's fascinating to hear your story, both to get the inside on, the inside look at living with this, but also we're now talking to you at a point where you've turned your life around. You're going after your trafficker, and it's all going down. So again, I can't thank you enough for letting us kind of watch this unfold because it's something a lot of people would not get to see or would never know about. So I appreciate you being so open with talking.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely surreal, but I mean, I don't know. Like, it's nice to have, I guess, and it's, so like I really appreciate that. And I mean, it is healing to be able to just openly kind of talk about it and say, this is what's happened. And, I mean, a lot of people just don't understand, because they've been fortunate enough to not know anybody, who's been through this or not have gone through something like this themselves or, and I kind of hope that, maybe a different victim, hears my story and faces, their trafficker. And so that's just how it is, it's the floodgates, like somebody has to open it. And so, I'll open it.
See what happens.
Basically.
I want to thank you for joining Jane Doe and I for a discussion surrounding child sex trafficking, survival, and justice. Jane has offered to continue to keep us up to date as her story hopefully comes full circle and hopefully ends in a conviction. But until then, we will continue to support her respectfully and optimistically. And with that, I'll wrap things up here, but before we part, I want to give some thanks. First, a big thanks to Jane Doe for sharing her story with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. A big shout out to Monty Datta for contributing the music for this episode. It's a piece called Noir Tokyo. And lastly, but most importantly, I have a massive thank you to everyone who listens to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, Nighttime would be as pointless as it would be impossible. But with that said, keeping the show alive is and has always been an uphill battle. So if you want to help take a bit of weight off the show's back, please subscribe to the premium feed. And not only does the premium feed keep the show alive, it'll give you more of each topic than you'll find here on the free feed, as I'm adding exclusive content regularly and maintain a full catalog of back episodes only on the premium feed. So for about the price of a cup of coffee, help the show out and get more of it at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And on the topic of the premium feed, let me thank the newest subscribers, Shelley, Cindy, and John. Thank you for your generous support. And for anyone else out there who'd like to support the show but can't do it with a premium feed subscription, you can give me a big hand by simply sharing this episode on social media and letting some like-minded friends know what we're doing here. If you have any story ideas, want to give feedback on the show, or contribute a voice memo to be shared in an upcoming episode, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. I hope to hear from you. But until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.